Today's topic is that there is a big digital divide between the rich countries and the poor countries, and how do we resolve that divide? Hello, everyone. It's good to be back with you once again. Today, I have with me a distinguished economist, Mark Kennet, who has worldwide experience. He knows a lot about the internet around the world, and he'll tell us all about it. So it's over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Subodh. I hope I can tell you something about it anyway. The challenge in global internet is to, as Subodh mentioned, we want to see what we can do to correct the divide between the wealthy countries and the not so wealthy countries. According to the United Nations, about 37% of the world's population have never used the internet. And about 50% of the world's population has no internet connection. Now, those breaches are heavily concentrated in poorer countries like India and countries in Africa. Ethiopia has 87% of the population has no internet access. Okay, whereas in the United States, it's much different. It's about 6% lack broadband access. So the question to start thinking about this first is, and I think it's a fair question, why should anyone care? We could view internet as a luxury. But there really are several answers to that question that make internet more than a luxury good for people. And the first point is that benefits of internet access do not only accrue to the individual who chooses to connect. The rest of the network benefits as well. That's called a network economic effect. And I'm not going to go into the details of economic networks, but it's a huge issue, because if I connect to the internet and I'm the only person on the internet, then I don't care. But
Yeah.
if the internet and there's a million other people connected to the internet, all of a sudden this becomes valuable. And so the more people you have on the internet, the more valuable it is for everybody.
Yeah.
What is called a network effect.
Yes, I get it.
Yeah. And the second big reason is that individual countries gain productivity as more citizens get access. In the mature economies, the internet represents about 3.5% of GDP. And estimates from around the world show that the internet contributes to growth in a range of 5% to 12% of GDP, depending on the economy. Obviously, that are better equipped to take advantage of internet are going to be able to grow more, but even the poorest countries can grow a great deal if they are able to acquire internet access. So that's why it's important. I got interested in it a long time ago. I started out doing telecommunications, which is another network industry, but it's not exactly the same. It uses a lot of the same technology, but we can talk about, if that's interesting, we can talk about why it's internet is harder to sponsor infrastructure than the old telephone networks. The reason is the traditional telecoms networks have a natural means of stimulating demand. And it's a system that every country except the United States and I think Qatar, if I'm not mistaken, have always used for telephones, and that is calling party pays. This is interesting to an economist because it's ingenious, because it means that if I have a phone and I call you, then I pay for the call. So that gives you a reason to have a phone. And if we just give away the handsets or give them away very cheaply, then everybody will have a phone before you know it. And that's in effect what happened with mobile phones in the last 25 years. The penetration rate is huge. mobile phones.
Yeah, let me give an example. If you are a migrant from a village to a city,
Mhm.
and you want to call your friends and family, they don't have the money, but you do, right? And so you just give them a handset and say, never call me, wait for my call.
Exactly.
Exactly. And I'll pay for it, but you don't have the money, so don't bother, but I'll call you. And so, that's how the phone spread, because people with even a little more money would call their friends and relatives. Or, in India, we used to have a missed call.
Right.
Right. You just call me and get off the phone, never pay for it. I'll
Yep,
call you back.
everybody around the world does that.
Right. Right. So that's how the phone spread. Right. So thank you, Mark. So let's move on to the internet.
Okay, well, with the internet, you don't have that feature. There's
Yeah.
no such thing as calling party pays because everybody's sharing the infrastructure and there's no natural way to set up that kind of cross-subsidy system. Okay, so setting up internet infrastructure is harder, especially in a poor country. And we have a few approaches that are being tried even as we speak in a number of countries, and I've worked on a number of them. Most of them fall into one or more of a couple of categories. First, there's funding from the development banks like the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, or the Inter-American Development Bank, which are the ones I know best. Then you have private investment funding with government participation, which ends up in one form or another being a PPP partnership between the private and public sectors. And different modes of those approaches have been used, sometimes successfully, sometimes not so successfully, to create internet backbones throughout mostly the rural areas is where these access points are lacking. And sometimes this is very complex, depending on the topography of the country. I worked a long time in Peru, which has a very complex topography. It has the coastal plain, which is pretty straightforward, and then it has extremely rugged mountains, perhaps not quite as rugged as the Himalayas, but they're up there. Then you have the jungle, which is a completely different world, where the city of Iquitos in Peru is the largest city in the world that has no land access. Get there by either air or boat.
Okay.
And so how do you set up an infrastructure to serve Iquitos? Well, they're doing it, but it's complex. And this leads to the biggest issue with all of this, which is costing and pricing, because what we're talking about here from an economics perspective is an industry with very high fixed costs and almost no variable costs.
Right.
So prices are almost artificial. Because usually when we talk about economics, we talk about price being equal to some notion of marginal cost.
Right.
Marginal cost is zero, or
Right.
de facto zero. I mean,
Right.
And so a lot of the trick with this whole business of trying to sponsor infrastructure development in the rest of the world is finding a way to make it work, both from the perspective of having people being able to afford to have access, as well as having it make some kind of economic sense for investors.
Right.
And this is the interesting challenge with the internet today. I mean, there are ongoing projects in countries that I'm familiar with and have worked on, in Mexico, in Peru, in Brazil, and in many places, the Caribbean islands, which are another special case because these islands are very small and
Right.
very few people, but they need to be connected. And how do you make that work? And this is this is what keeps me busy from day to day.
Okay, you have any success stories to tell us?
Success stories. Well, I think the most successful project I've worked on so far has been the Mexican case where the World Bank and the Mexican government collaborated to build a wholesale broadband network that is shared. It's sort of a separate company, and its benefits are shared by the different companies that are going to provide or are providing access to the small rural areas in Mexico, which, of which there are many, and we're talking about many millions of people. And so now there are broadband connections to, I'd say, 85% of the population in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
There have been other cases that have not been so successful. In Peru, the government sponsored a national broadband system, and then they wanted to privatize it. And they found a investor to do that. But meanwhile, the national operators had already built a backbone infrastructure. And so this new company that came in to invest was simply undercut by prices for any of the profitable routes, and stuck holding the bag, trying to reach the very small rural villages in the mountains and the jungle.
Okay.
So that's a classic problem in all kinds of public services.
But let me ask you a very tough question.
Sure.
If things go well, when do you think we can see most of this problem solved? I know we can't solve it 100%, but most of this problem of broadband access, is it doable by 2030, or is it not doable even by 2030? I mean, where are we?
Well, I think it's doable. I think it requires, continuing these kinds of approaches, but I think there also needs to be an education component, because I remember in the early days of Peru's expansion, they would bring internet into a village, and the old folks had no idea what to do with it. The young folks would go into what they called a cabina, which was like a shared internet access point, and they would spend all day either playing games or downloading pornography.
Right.
They had no idea what else to do with it. And,
right.
And, this was in the days of the physical mouse, and so they would take a little ball out of the mouse, and they'd play ball with the mouse and and so you have to include an education component so that people understand the value of this technology. And I think the other part of it is you have to find a way to, it's related, you have to find a way to stimulate the demand. So that people in rural areas want to have this access. I think it starts with having access to Netflix and to cable television equivalents, and people want that. They like the entertainment.
Right.
They need to find a way to understand that this can actually help their profitability if they are a small business, or their ability to earn a living if they are an individual, and that requires some work. So now the international funding organizations have mostly focused on infrastructure, because they say, well, we don't want to get into the business of content, and we don't want to get into the business of telling people what to do with this, but we do want to help finance it. And they're starting to realize slowly but surely that they do need to have the other piece of it as well.
Okay. Yeah. It's quite clear that people, I am working with people in villages through video. Okay. And most of the young people there, they're young, they're 17 to 25. And first of all, the internet connection is poor. It's hard to understand, but they have no clue what to do with it. They have no clue. Yeah, sometimes they watch me, they entertain themselves with it and they chat with friends, but beyond that, it is not productive at all.
Right.
Till you teach them how to use it, okay, what good it is for. Okay, so I accept your point. It's my practical experience.
I mean, there are new demands being put on internet infrastructure. The pandemic has opened up, extra interest in making sure that we have connectivity all over the world, because for a period of time, people were unable to go to school.
Yeah, no, I understand. So I think it's very clear, just to sort of sum up, that we have to bridge this gap. I mean, there's just no way around it. It has to be done, and the faster, the better. And partly the technology is already there, the financing, the soft part of it. That, I think what you are saying is that we need the soft part, we need the financing, and we need to understand the local case of each country. We can't come up with a simple template and make it work. Okay, that's very interesting. Anything else you'd like to add, Mark?
Well, I think that there's a lot of space. It's kind of funny in a way, because I guess maybe 15 years ago, when I was doing mostly telecom stuff, I was thinking, you know what, I've had a good run doing this independent telecommunications consulting, but it's going to dry up, and it's not going to be there anymore after a while. But it's okay, because I've saved enough money that I can bow out gracefully.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I'm in more demand than I ever was.
Well, the thing is that the demand is rising because you are reaching out to more and more people, right?
Correct.
Okay, good. I'm glad it's keeping you busy. I'm sure the world needs your skills and talent. And I think we end it here.
Okay.
And I say, let me just say bye to my viewers, and perhaps you can also join me in saying bye-bye. And thank you, Mark. Okay.
Thank you for inviting me.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.